Hi there, thanks for joining me today. I wanted to do a state of the watch collection video. I've never done one before and I figured, well, it's the end of 2020, so I might as well do one. I've got 20 watches in my collection, so I'll do them in two halves. This is the first half that I have here. I guess a little bit about myself as a collector. I pretty much focus on classically styled watches that I feel are very timeless. For the most part, there are some exceptions to that rule, but that's my main watch philosophy. I really try and buy what I love. I do have a lot of mechanical watches, but I do have a few quartz as well. I have a 20 watch box, and so 20 watches fits into that collection. I think maybe 10 watches or 5 watches would maybe be the perfect size, but I haven't quite whittled it down to that number just yet. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the watches that I have here. All right, so this is the first watch in my collection. This is a Seiko World Timer 6217. I think I'm probably similar to a lot of people in the fact that I do like GMT and World Time watches, and certainly the Seiko World Timer scratches that itch. It's dating from the 1960s, actually the mid 1960s, and I think some of the notable things about this particular model, this was the very first World Time model that Seiko produced, and it has a really nice sort of linen dial, and it has the all the cities on the outside of the dial. You can adjust that using the crown by moving it back and forth. You can adjust it based off of the city that you're on. It does also have a GMT hand, but it is not independently movable. I think one other thing that's kind of interesting about this watch is that a lot of these were produced around the time of the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. And so on this one, although it's very hard to see, it actually does have a medallion on the back for that Tokyo Olympic Games. And so I thought that was kind of neat. And I used to live in Japan as well, outside of the Tokyo area, and so to me this is just kind of a neat sort of a memento, even though I didn't purchase it there, of that connection that I have with Japan. The bracelet on this watch is not original. It is a Seiko branded bracelet, but it looks like what I've referred to as a Bambi style bracelet, which kind of has these rectangular brick sections with these bead of rice sections in the middle, and then like I guess maybe a more traditional outer link design here. Very evocative of that 1960s era, and I don't know, I just find it kind of neat and interesting, so that was kind of what drew me to this watch. All right, the next one on this list is a Seiko 6138 Bullhead. This one is the brown dial variant, and it's got the sort of, I guess, bronze or copper-colored subdials with the white hands, hour and minute hands, and yellow sweep hand. This is one that I just absolutely adore. I've actually owned about 3 or 4 of these, and have sold them off. And when I got this last one, which was basically in a parts condition, I knew that I may not be able to find another one, so I want to make sure that I keep this one. And I really just enjoy it. It's just so weird and quirky. There's a lot of interesting things about it. The case shape itself is very unusual. It's got sort of this wedge design. On this particular model, it's been pretty beat up over the years, and a lot of these are actually pretty beat up when you find them used. But originally, they had a lot of different brushed and polished features on the case, which I find extremely fascinating. Of course, this bullhead shape, because it's got the 2 pushers on the top, and then the crown in the middle, and then the bracelet, which is an aftermarket reproduction of the original fishbone bracelet. Again, very unusual, but super comfortable. I'm just a very big fan of this watch. I love wearing it all the time. It is very top heavy, but I think it's just such a cool watch, and has so much flair and so many interesting design quirks about it that I just absolutely love wearing it. All right, the next one here is a Seiko 6139 6000 series, often referred to as the Pogue, so named because Commander William Pogue wore this on one of the Space Lab missions. I think it was maybe Space Lab 4. And yeah, I is another one, just like the other two, that actually I bought in a parts condition and had restored. It's all original except for the bracelet, which is another aftermarket, and then the crystal as well is a replacement. You know, I think the dial is something you either love or hate. And I would say for me, the first time I saw this, I was not totally in love with the bright yellow dial, but it sort of grew on me, and also I just kind of have a love for this watch because of a connection in my family. My grandfather worked as a contractor for NASA in the 1960s and 70s, and the Skylab mission was one of the missions that he worked on. In fact, the one with William Pogue was one that he worked on. And so this has a little bit of an extra special connection with me. So, you know, I figure I've got to have this one in my collection. I've actually owned a couple as well, just like the Bullhead, and have sold those. But this one, again, I came across and decided I just need to keep it. And it's a really fun watch to wear. I mean, you can't not be in a good mood when you're wearing a watch with a yellow dial, and you know, you got these blue accents and red accents and white accents and a black date wheel. I mean, there's just so much going on, but it's just really interesting and unique. I also really love the sort of barrel shaped case on this with sort of these scallop sections as well. I think it's just really interesting looking and very unique to Seiko. So this is another one that I really enjoy wearing quite a lot. All right, this next one here is a what's commonly referred to as a Seiko rally diver. This is the 5126 Seiko rally diver. I've sometimes heard these called the double hurricane, and that's partly because it's got this two bezel design here. So you've got this outer bezel which moves, but then you've also got an inner bezel which moves as well. So you can adjust multiple bezels on here, and maybe that's useful for timing. I don't know that these were really used for anything when they were initially sold. I think it was more of just trying to capture the craze of the dive watch era and having something that was relatively affordable that the masses could wear. It's got a 70-meter water resistance, but obviously this one being a vintage watch, you know, it's probably not going to hold very much water resistance. But you know, for the crowd back in the 1960s when this was produced, this was perfectly fine for going swimming, going to the beach, maybe even surfing. Who knows? This particular watch I got from a friend of mine in England. I just happened to be very interested in rally divers at the time, and he was kind enough to send me one. This particular watch, and it did need a service, so I had it serviced, and then I put it on this new old stock Tropic branded strap that I've got here, and I think it just suits the watch really well. It's just a really nice watch overall. It's not very big in size. I think it's only around 37 millimeters, but it's just got such an interesting look, and it's so, you know, weird and unique, just like a lot of other Seiko models from this era. That you know, it's definitely one I'm happy to own, and one I will, because of connection with a friend, I'll likely never sell. All right, this next one on the list is a watch, actually the newest watch to my collection, and it is the Hamilton Khaki Pilot Pioneer. Hopefully I'm getting all this right. And it's based off of a Hamilton watch used by the British military in the 1970s. There's another watch that's very similar to it, made by CWC, and Hamilton and CWC both produced these in the 1970s. Both companies have actually now started reproducing them again. This one is a little bit different from the CWC variant in the fact that it's got this sort of aged loom on it. And I think, which is a really neat feature, is this sort of textured dial. It's really hard to see here, but it's got this sort of granulated pattern on the dial, which I think is really interesting and unique. And you know, it's not a very big watch. I think it's only 33 millimeters across. But I think it's very interesting to find a military watch that is produced in 2020 that is under, say, 38 or 40 millimeters in size. The originals were 33 millimeters, and I really like the fact that Hamilton decided to stick with the original size of this watch and keep it as true to form as possible outside of the dial and the age lume. So I really like this a lot. I think it's just very simplistic and very sharp. Yeah, it does have that barrel shape, which is very evocative of the 1970s, but I kind of like that. I think it's really interesting, and so I really enjoy wearing this. It's a fun casual watch to wear. Okay, this next one here is a watch I've owned for a couple years now, and this is the Oris 65 diver, and this is the bicolor model. So it's got a stainless steel case with these bronze accents on it. It's got the bronze bezel and these center links on the bracelet. And it also has although it's hard to see here, a gilt dial with these sort of yellow aged markers and a very deep blue color. And when this came out at Basel, I think it was in 2019, I just thought it was just super cool looking. I've always been a big fan of Oris. Oris is a big fan of watches and watch collectors. You can tell there's just a lot of passion there. And so I was already kind of looking to buy my first Oris, and I thought this one was just really cool looking. I think the 65 in particular is just such a cool watch line, and really does a fantastic job of sort of recreating the style and feel of a 1960s skin diver. It's not overly large. The cases are pretty thin. It does have that double, or I should say the domed sapphire crystal, which is really unique and sort of evocative of those skin diver watches, which obviously would have had a plexi crystal. And then I think, which is a really nice feature, is this rivet bracelet that has a heavy taper on it. I think it goes from about 19 or 20 millimeters down to about 14 millimeters. And I think it just looks super, super cool. And it's actually extremely comfortable to wear as well. I think this is one of the coolest watches that Oris has made. The 65 divers in particular, I think, are just a really nice value. And especially if you want something that's a modern construction but really pays a nice homage to the 1960s skin diver dive watches, I think that the Oris Diver 65 is a fantastic watch. I do also really like that they have added the date wheel, but done it in a very inconspicuous way. It's at the 6 o'clock marker. It's on a black date wheel, and it just blends in very nicely. So I think that's just really nice attention to detail, and I'm very happy to own this piece as well. All right, this next one on the list is another one that I have purchased in 2020, and I've done a review on this one as well. This is the Omega Speedmaster, first Omega in space. I think I must have purchased one of the last ones when I got this in October of this year, because this watch has now been discontinued. You know, I just think that this is just such an unusual watch in the fact that, you know, it is a Speedmaster, but it's paying respect to a lesser known Speedmaster. It's not the one that was worn on space. This was the one that was worn by Walt Schirra on one of the Mercury missions. And so I just think it's really interesting looking, and I like the fact that it's a little bit slimmed down. It's got these straight lugs on it. It does have a sapphire crystal, which probably would not have been my first choice, but I'm totally fine with that. You know, I think one of my only criticisms of this watch is that the crown is very small, so it's a little bit hard to wind. But overall, I just think it's a really nice package, and I just really love wearing this. I didn't think I would enjoy wearing a Omega Speedmaster as much as I do wearing this. And also I've got it on the Forstner flat link bracelet. I just think it makes such a nice combination, and I just really enjoy wearing this one quite a lot. Okay, this next one on the list is a Breitling Geneve chronograph. This is a watch that I purchased about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was basically in new old stock condition, and I didn't know a whole lot about it other than the fact that it just wasn't worn very much. But I found that a little bit interesting in the fact that it looks like it was from the late 1960s. You can see the similarity with the Omega Speedmaster Mark II and the fact that it's got that big barrel shape. But you know, this thing wasn't worn very well. It still has all of its original finish here. The crystal is original. The dial looks perfect. So I was wondering, how could that have happened? How could it be that this watch sat around unused? And actually, this is not the only one out there like this. There are others that are very similar to this model. Also, this sort of gold plated barrel case chronograph, which has a Wajs 7736 that I've seen that are also in a more or less a new old stock condition. So I did some digging, and it turns out that there's a guy named Joseph Iten, and the last name is Iten, and he happened to purchase a large cache of Breitling watches when Breitling went out of business in the late 1970s, and he basically sat on them for about 20 years until an American company came along and purchased these in the 1990s and then started selling these off. And so this particular watch was a part of that group. And then, you know, at some point, maybe in the mid 2000s, this particular model was sold. I don't know how many other owners it bounced around on, but it ended up with me, and you know, I think it's a really neat looking watch. You know, again, very 1960s, late 1960s, 70s in its style. But I think it's really interesting, and you know, just a little something that's a little bit different from what I would normally own. I don't own a lot of gold toned watches, and so I just wanted something that's a little bit off the beaten path for me. And so I picked up this watch, and I just absolutely love wearing it. And I think it's got a lot of character to it, and is, you know, really stands out a lot, as you can see. Next to the Breitling, for a very good reason, because it does look like a Breitling, but it's not. It's an Olek and Wajs Aviation Chronograph. This watch was also came about as a result of Breitling going out of business. And when that happened, and Willy Breitling sold the company in the late 1970s, there were two companies that really stepped in. And one of them was Zen, and the other one was Olek and Wajs. And Zen purchased a lot of the designs for the old Breitling Navitimer models, and Olek and Wajs ended up with purchasing a lot of the spares, and so in unmade watches. And this happens to be one of them. This is a Wajs 7736, and it's, you know, essentially a new old stock version of the Breitling Navitimer. You know, another one I just think is very interesting and unusual. It does have a plexi crystal on it, has basically no water resistance whatsoever. And you know, it's even something that I'm very nervous wearing even when I wash my hands, just because the crystal will fog up extremely easily. But I like it in the fact that it's much smaller than the modern Breitlings, and came at a much cheaper price as well. So that was a big factor for me. And you know, besides that, it just looks very beautiful. I have it here on a olive colored calf strap, and I just think it really suits the character of this watch really well. All right, the last one of the 10 that I've got here, this is a Zodiac Aerospace GMT. This is one I purchased actually earlier in the summer. I've actually owned a couple of these now, and this is the nicest one I've ever seen. Very small, only around 35 millimeters in size, and you can see it's very clearly inspired by the more famous Rolex GMT Master. But you know, I've always had a little bit of a thing for Zodiac watches. I think they're very neat and very underrated. And when I saw this one come up for sale, I just had to purchase it. Probably paid a little bit more than I really should have, but I got it, and then I sent it off and had it serviced earlier this year. I think it's just a really, really nice looking watch, and also has that really cool feature with the stretchy links on the bracelet. It's very hard to find these bracelets in original condition. Most of the time you see these, it's just the head only. So finding this watch with the box and papers and the stretchy bracelet in a really nice condition, it was just something I just could not pass up. Anyway, that's it for the first 10. We'll move on to the second half in just a moment.